We begin this brand new hour of a special edition of the Big Weekend Show with a look at what to expect when voters head to the polls on Tuesday for the Texas GOP Senate primary runoff.
We have a great candidate, I believe, in Texas. I think probably he'll win very substantially. And I think he'll go on to defeat a very defective candidate, a candidate that believes in 6 genders, and he takes hits at Jesus Christ. He's a vegan in Texas, and you can't get elected as a vegan in Texas.
Republican Ken Paxton currently leads incumbent Senator John Cornyn in the polls, but Cornyn is insisting that he's the better option to defeat Democrat nominee James Tallarico.
There's going to be a veritable tsunami of Democratic donor money from all over the country because this is the ultimate goal, to turn Texas blue. And unfortunately, I think if Paxton's a nominee, they have a better than even chance of doing that.
Trump's choice is getting some pushback from Senate Republicans who were reportedly speechless over his Paxton pick.
Mood is one of sadness. Not all of us are 100% on the same page as the president all the time.
I like Senator Cornyn. I think he's been a great colleague. I'd like to see him stay in the Senate.
You all know my position on this issue. I've made it very clear for months now. I am certainly supportive of, will continue to be supportive of Senator Cornyn and his reelection.
Joining us now is Texas GOP Senate candidate Ken Paxton. It's great to have you. Congratulations on your Trump endorsement. He's got a pretty good track record with those things. Hey, look, I'll tell you, Ken, when I look at this, I look at getting somebody who's going to uphold the America First agenda, not only beat Tallarico, but somebody who's actually going to be a fighter for not only President Trump's agenda, but for the American people. So I don't see the point in electing a Republican in name only. But obviously, there's going to be some things thrown at you if you are, in fact, the nominee that's taken on, or the winner that's taken on Tallarico. So how are you going to address some of the scandals that are no doubt coming your way? You're going to have to answer a lot of questions. I know you've had to before, but how do you take that on?
Look, this is what happens when you're fighting. Donald Trump had the same issues. He was indicted. He was prosecuted. He was impeached. I've been through the same things. And look what Donald Trump's done since those supposed scandals. In the end, it's about fighting for America. It's about fighting for my state, about doing the right things. And I think when you do those things, you are going to be attacked. And that just comes with the territory, unfortunately. It's just the way it is. And I think you can see exactly what happened with Donald Trump. He was down, and yet, in the end, the American people spoke. And I think the same thing's going to happen in this race.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends in Texas. Anecdotally, I guess most of them have supported you in this race so far. Just getting those conversations going. I understand that the MAGA base certainly falls in line behind you. I'd say the majority of Republicans probably do too. Well, not the majority, but many Republicans do as well. Are you as appealing as John Cornyn to any independent voters or blue voters that may not think Tallarico is their choice? And if so, why? What is it about your policies that you want to advocate for that a independent or moderate Texan would vote for?
Well, first of all, there's no proof that I don't do better than John Cornyn, actually. In some of these polls, I've done better, but he doesn't do any better than I do overall. I've won 3 statewide elections, so this idea that somehow John's a better candidate statewide, there's no proof of that. And the fact that I've won 3 statewide races, I think proves that I can win statewide races. Some of them I won by a really wide margin, and most of those races I've spent a lot less than my opponent. So this is just a concoction of John Cornyn because he can't win his primary, and he's trying to convince people I haven't accomplished anything in 42 years, and he hasn't. I've only done bad things. So just vote for me anyway because I can win and he can't. But it's just a made-up point. It's not true.
General Kevin Corke here. Thank you for your time tonight. I think there are a number of people who would say, I'm going to vote for Ken Paxton because he seems like more of a Texan than the other guy. He seems like a guy who shares my values. But I'm just curious, what separates you from John Cornyn, another Texan who loves his state, has a lot of people who like him there? What's the difference if somebody was sitting and asking me tonight?
It's a pretty big difference. I mean, John Cornyn supported Joe Biden's restriction on Second Amendment rights. I fought for Second Amendment rights. He also helped Joe Biden bring Afghan refugees here without vetting them. I would never have helped Joe Biden do that. He fought Trump. John Cornyn fought Trump on the border, and you can go back over about a decade and see that he was not for the border wall. He was for amnesty, pushed amnesty. These are things that Texans don't like. And he also fought the president's reelection. He fought him in 2024, said his time had passed, and he fought him in 2016. So this is not a pro-Trump guy. I don't know if we could be more different on the Republican issues than John Cornyn and me. So there is a vast difference between the two of us.
Mr. Attorney General, it's Alicia Acuna here. As you know, this runoff has created quite a bit of heartburn in your party, in part because there are Republicans who are concerned that should you be successful in the runoff, that the GOP will now have to spend upwards of $100,000 to $200,000 that they wouldn't have had to have spent in Texas should you not have run.
Again, it's interesting. I think about $150 million has been spent on John Cornyn in his primary. And if he had somehow won, we'd be spending another $150 million on the race. It doesn't matter whether it's him or me. We've got to go win this race in Texas. So in the end, I'm going to make the argument that we spent double what we would have spent had they just taken those resources instead of fighting me, sent them to Georgia, sent them to North Carolina, sent them to Michigan, sent them to New Hampshire. I think this was a calculated mistake, putting money in against a fellow Republican rather than waiting for the general election where we really need to fight.
Certainly. Well, hey, listen, the voters are going to speak very soon, and you've got the Trump endorsement. So that's kind of a golden ticket.
You're almost halfway there.
Thank you.
We'll call
it's
you
been great. I appreciate that endorsement.
The Senate candidate, although you have many titles, Ken Paxton, thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, Joey, I know you're very closely connected to Texas.
I love Texas. If it's 3 states too far away from Georgia, I might still live there. I'll say this. This is frustrating for me because he is a very strong candidate, and the people that like him are very passionate about him. And he has weathered the storm of scandal, and he was impeached by a Republican House. And so, like, there are some baggage there that he's going to carry into the general if he wins this thing, and I think he probably will, and he will have earned it at that point. I mean, it's been a hard-fought race. But, I ask him, what are the policies that Ken Paxton has that will win over moderate or independent voters that's good for Texas or good for the country? And he talks about John Cornyn. It talks about, I think what he talked about was that he's won a statewide race. He talked about being candidate Paxton, I guess. Yeah. I want to know about Senator Paxton. And then you ask about kind of the same question, what set you aside? And he talks about President Trump. So I know he's in campaign mode, but I think those are the questions Texans are asking. They know what they have with Cornyn, good and bad, but they know what they have. And maybe I guess they do with Paxton, too, because he's been in a statewide office. But we're talking about electing him to the U.S. Senate. And what is the issue that he's going to sever from the Republican Party or MAGA from? Because everybody's got something. And, it's important that people know what those issues are, too.
Well, to your point, though, I will just say when it comes to being a fighter, he has been a fighter in his current role. And he's done a lot of things.
What was that, a retire? I mean, when you're being impeached and investigated, you have to fight. You don't have a choice.
He's done a lot of things when I say not just fighting for himself. He's done a lot of things to fight for the people of Texas.
Yes.
Not for him. I've looked at, obviously his record.
Like I said, all my friends there are backing him, and they like him, and they like the brand of Texan that he brings, to your point.
Yeah. He reminds me a lot of like a Governor DeSantis in that he does things in Texas as the AG. He's done a lot of things.
He's not afraid.
Yeah, he's not afraid, and he's taken on a lot of folks, and so I appreciate that about him. Cornyn, I feel, is a rhino, and that's just my perspective, and I'm happy to offer it. But Kevin, to Joey's point here, when it comes to the Trump endorsement, we know that we've sat at this table and we've talked about the Trump endorsement.
97%.
Yeah, last weekend we were talking to Bill Cassidy. That was now a neutralized issue. We were talking about Thomas Massie. That's now a neutralized issue. I think we have a success rate there. Does this make all the difference in the world?
I think so, certainly in this runoff. But I think to Joey's point, it's going to be incumbent upon him to make sure that he's communicating what he'll do differently once he gets a chance to be on the big stage. I think the president's endorsement really pretty much seals the deal. And that's no disrespect to John Cornyn, a man who has served his state well. But I do believe that I know lots of Texans. I love the state of Texas. And I can understand why they feel like John Cornyn did not uphold their ideas consistently when compared to Ken Paxton, and that's why he's probably going to win. That's probably why he got the president's endorsement. I think that's what happens.
Yeah, it's no surprise to me that he got the Trump endorsement,
Right.
Alicia. But, you know, to another one of the points we've been making about spending money here, there's been a lot of primaries where Republicans have spent money against Republicans. This is no different, and this is a big deal. And, you know, we saw the Democrats dump a lot of money into Beto. They're going to dump a lot of money into Tallarico.
Yeah.
And when we look at this from a national perspective outside of Texas, how much does that matter?
Yeah, well, we will
The
see,
vegan.
right? When you mentioned Tallarico, Bill Maloogian put this up today. The super PAC supporting Ken Paxton today dropped its very first ad against Tallarico using only his own words. Far left positions against him, including God is non-binary, 6 genders, transgender children, et cetera, ends with low T Tallarico. So, yes, the president has an incredible record when it comes to endorsements. The general election and the general election electorate is a little different. So there is a fight there for them in Texas, but yeah, it'll be interesting.
No, and I will say this. I don't think Ken Paxton should worry about not being competitive against Tallarico. Like that Cornyn, at the end of the day, nothing will get Texans out to vote like a Beto O'Rourke or a Tallarico looking like they have momentum. I think that winning the primary in this case puts them in a strong position. I do.
Yeah, well, it's going to remain to be seen, but we're all going to be watching, and you can watch, of course, right here on Fox News.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.